Okay, everybody, welcome. Let me begin our panel discussion today, but again, thanking Bill, thanking Pat, thanking, of course, Tony for putting everything together. It's been an exciting day, a lot of good content. Want to make sure, though, that we give all the proper introductions here. Again, my name is Greg Benaz. I'm head of business development and managing director at Stewart Partners. I'll give my panelists a little opportunity here to give a brief intro for each one of them. So I'll start with Jeff.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Stewart. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I work with Hilltop Securities. We're a self-clearing broker-dealer that clears for about 200 small independent broker-dealers. We've got a private client side and an independent side as well.
Frank?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Frank LaRosa. I'm the CEO of Elite Consulting Partners. As Jeff had said, we run myself and my COO here, Dale Dempsey, run a 30-plus person transition consulting firm. We work nationally. We work with wirehouse firms, regional firms, independent firms, RIAs across the full spectrum, so completely agnostic to the direction of an advisor. And we like to say that we help advisors transition their goals into reality.
Kelly?
Good afternoon. My name is Catlin Ulmer-Long. I am the Director of Private Client Group Administration at Janney Montgomery Scott, based out of Philly. We are a privately held boutique wealth management firm with about 875 advisors, 120 branches across the Northeast.
Great. Chris?
Great. Chris Moan. I work at Wedbush Securities, and I run the wealth management business for the firm. Our wealth management business at Wedbush consists of a W-2 branch network, private wealth management. We have an independent contractor channel or independent franchise owner network. We have an RIA services division and a multi-custodial RIA business as well. So we have, we've been in Los Angeles for the last 66 years, and we're expanding throughout the country, recently into New York and Philadelphia.
Great. Greg?
Thank you. Greg Tricoli, B. Riley Wealth Management. We're probably at a head count now on the advisory side, closer to about 900 advisors, a little over $32 billion in assets. 750 of those advisors or so are independent, and then we run a W-2 model. Recently, B. Riley in the news about 4 weeks ago, B. Riley Financial, our parent company, was ranked number 2 in the Fortune 100 fastest growing companies, so that's given us a nice tailwind, and everything they're doing at the parent company on the investment banking side has really grown our reputation on the wealth management side as well.
Excellent, thanks. Yeah, certainly we want to talk about our topic today, and I know it's the end of the day. We've gone over a couple themes with regard to the COVID effect, both present and going into the future. But we'd also like to make this a little bit more, audience participation, so to speak. So again, feel free to raise hands, interact with our panel. I think the nice thing about this panel, when I originally was introduced to them about a week ago, was we've got a recruiter up here, CEO of a recruiter firm. We've got private client group expertise, business development, wealth management. So a nice diverse group of people who see different areas of the business, and of course with regard to COVID topics, themes, and items that have happened. So when we talked about this on our call, themes like succession planning, technology, cybersecurity, all these things that we're learning and seeing as the evolution of the business. I think this is probably the one area of our business that was completely blindsided in many ways. I mean, the last 20 months really has been completely unknown. I mean, I know people had disaster recovery plans. They were talking about things that we could do in the event of a crisis, but having everyone stop business, coming into the office and working from home, this was rather unique. And one of the topics that we want to talk about is just that real estate scenario. And, I'll start with you, Catlin. Tell me a little bit about, from your perspective, where you, of course, at Janney, but where, we're going with real estate portfolios going forward.
Yeah, so I think that's a question that keeps coming up. And as far as Janney is concerned, we're really not making too many changes. I mean, I know we're probably one of the few firms that when everything went down in March of last year, we never closed our branches, any of our branches. We left all of those decisions up to our local managers to determine what made the most sense for their branches in their communities. And what we have seen is that most of those branches have been occupied, at least to some level, throughout the entire 18 months, and we don't really expect that there's going to be a lot of change being made there.
In the hybrid work environment, we were talking about that too. I mean, what does that look like?
I think that one of the things that a lot of people have seen as they've started coming back to the office again more frequently is that, yes, we have the ability to work at home in specific circumstances, but that we're a relationship business first and foremost, and being together in person is critical. And so we're having people just making very intentional decisions about what they are doing from home, when they are doing it from home, and then the very intentional decision about what they're going to do when they're going to be together.
Chris?
So, first of all, I can tell you that there are other people in the room that have done a triathlon. Tony actually did one last week. He was on a Zoom call with me, spilled a bottle of water all over himself, and then tripped over his wife's exercise bike because he was running to the bathroom. So I think that kind of counts as a triathlon. But that said, as far as hybrid working from home, many of us, Catlin and I were talking about this last night. There was an article that came out about Hightower's new approach, where they said they're going to have mandatory 2 to 3 days a week, and it was actually pretty interesting. They came out with a concrete plan. They were going to have a mandatory work day, but 2 to 3 days per week in the office for their corporate employees. Now, if you think about the people in this room, the one part that caught my eye was they said there's going to be 4 weeks of work from anywhere. So if you've ever wanted to travel to Europe, work in Europe, rent an Airbnb, and then just work from there and then come home. But spend 4 weeks a year doing that. Now, my first reaction was, for the people in this room, that sounds really interesting. For the people that report to us, that sounds pretty interesting as well. But then when you start going down a little bit further, the Europe becomes, I'm going to stay at home, and I'm going to, or I might go to my mom's house or my friend's house, and I'm not exactly sure how much work is going to get done. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But many people are waiting for the regulators. Personally, I don't believe that we're going to get any type of guidance from any of the SROs or the regulators that we're waiting for. I think they're going to wait it out. They don't have a compelling reason or a motivation to give us guidance on that, and I think that we have to move forward and think about, and at Wedbush, we've certainly put the safety of our colleagues first, so we're deliberately looking to be last and move slowly, but yet we expect fully that there are going to be 3 categories of employees. There's going to be full-time, there'll be hybrid, and then there'll be remote. And when we ultimately return to work full-time, because we have been working remotely principally. We have 100,000 square feet in downtown Los Angeles, and I think 4 or 5 people working every day. So it'll be interesting as we come back to work, but we're going to move very slowly and carefully as we do it.
So Greg, when we were talking also last week, we were, again, bouncing around the whole idea what 5-day work week looks like, and what does the office role play? Is it more of a hub now for innovation and collaboration? What are you seeing specifically in this area of the woods?
Well, be careful what you wish for. One of our key recruiting lines to advisors that we'd like to come over to the firm is that you sort of earned your chops in the marketplace, and we're an entrepreneurial type of firm. So we have all the infrastructure, but you're treated as an adult. We're used to running compliance, whether it's on-site or off. We have all the systems in place, and we trust our advisors to do the right thing. I will tell you that there are some branches in our system where the capacity is probably 80% of the advisors are in. They want the water cooler banter. They want to be around the action of the office. But in New York, we've had 2 advisors that never skipped a day from March of 2020. They've been in every day. But out of 26, 28 advisors in that office, they're the only 2 that have come in every day, and on a rotational basis, maybe we'll see 3 or 4 advisors in the New York office. We're fine with that. there's been no mishap or any skipping to the beat of them running their practice, and it's a proven model. We talked about this on our call, that Wall Street really was putting in place these contingency plans since 9/11. So the technology, when we flipped the switch, which again was unprecedented to your point, that the whole industry had to go remote, right? That was never accounted for. But the infrastructure's in place, and it's worked well for us. So we want our advisors to operate where they're comfortable.
Frank, I didn't want to just have recruiting questions, but with transition strategies, what's that office environment basically coming up in conversation with people you're talking to?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to, if I just can dovetail off of that, and I think that this issue of real estate, and I applaud Janney for doing what they were doing and all the other firms, but it's less of an issue in the independent space than it is in the retail wirehouse space. They are on a slippery slope because if they push too hard and make everybody come back, then advisors are going to say, well, it's not happening on the independent side. I can do what I want on the independent side. So I have to be really careful. And I think that FINRA is going to slow play it as much as they can, not to make any decisions. But if the wires are smart, and I say wires only because a Janney or a Smith, a Raymond James, some of the smaller regional firms are more amenable to what's going on right now. The wires are just sort of tend to be black and white, right? But if they're really smart, they'll apply pressure to FINRA to not make any drastic changes, right? Use technology for better compliance. Make sure that you can control off-site work. Like, use our technology. That's what we're talking about today. So use the technology to give advisors all this flexibility. And I say advisors, their staff as well. Let's not forget that. There's advisors and their staff. Advisors always have a lot of flexibility. Staff, not so much. But in terms of transitioning, it's definitely, this fear of a Wells advisor, a Morgan advisor, a Merrill advisor being told on a certain day you have to report to the office. They're not seeing it that way because they've been working from home for a year and a half. Their AUM is up, record growth, and they're going, why do I need to work from home? I work from the office. On a personal note, I believe that we're going to move back to advisors coming back to the office for the water cooler, for the innovation, for the ideas, for the camaraderie. And I think it sounds cool to say, oh, we're in a work from home environment from now on. I don't believe that's going to be the case forever because you're just not going to get growth being on a Zoom call with another team member across the country or in another state because they're in Florida. It's not the same thing as sitting at the end of the day in a conference room, talking shop, having a soda or whatever, talking about what's going on. It's just not the same thing. But I think that this has opened the floodgates to advisors looking outside of the retail space, and helping advisors find what's the right fit for them, right? Can they work from home? If they go take office space, do they have to have so much office space? Some of the office space structures I think will change a little bit. You count the tiles on the ceiling, right? I think those tiled offices are going to get a little bit smaller. If you look at family offices as a whole, they typically have smaller advisor offices and then meeting rooms where they meet with their clients. I can see that as an evolution in real estate specifically. But I think we are going to get back to a place where more advisors and staff are in offices. There's some flexibilities there, maybe not going to Europe for 2 weeks, but because I agree, there's just people that just can't work efficiently at home, and they're going to have to figure out how to manage that better.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Remember, there still hasn't been specific guidance given out to how remote locations should be managed or supervised. So this is still a challenge. Jeff, at the risk of not being redundant, is there anything that you'd like to cover that we haven't? If not, I'd like to segue into technology.
I concur with everyone. I'll make one brief comment. Where you're regionally located, right, you had a different experience with COVID. So we're in Texas, right? So it was a little different down there. I would say that we were back to it sooner than most people. From the standpoint of our advisor base, we've got independents and we've got offices as well. Right, the independents can always do what they want, but we made the decision with our offices. We're flexible. It is up to you. When you feel like coming back, come back. And to be quite honest, I would think that the offices, we're probably 85 or 95% back. We really are. The one thing we did find, though, in all of this is when people aren't there, there's a lot of teams that we all work with. Teams don't work really well when one or two people are remote. They may think they work well, but they don't. And so we've instituted an exercise where all of our teams, we said, what's your job title and what's your role? And that may seem like an odd exercise, but when we bring these teams together, everyone can articulate their job title. That job title on different teams has very different roles. And what you'll find is there's a cadence with a team, right? Whether you're aware of it or not, if you're all working around each other throughout the day, you hear things, you know who's doing what, things don't get dropped. And when one of those people is missing, some things get dropped. And I think this exercise of saying, what's your role, what's your job title, has really helped these teams individually, find where the gaps are. Because the new world is, one or two people aren't going to be there right throughout the week, right? We've got rotating schedules, we've got this, but having them hunker down on roles and defined functions, I think has tightened things up. So again, it's about flexibility, but it's about understanding how a team works, and every team works a little differently. And I think that we'll come through this stronger for sure, but it's a new world from here moving forward. There's no doubt about it.
Again, if anybody has any questions about thematically things we're talking about, please feel free to raise your hand or stand up, and we'd like to get this a little more interactive. But based on what you just said, while I'm waiting for some hands to go up, I'm going back to something Trish Mull at Ameriprise said, where she was citing a J.D. Power and Associates poll that people are desiring, sophisticated clients are desiring quarterly meetings. When you think about the Zoom technology and how technology has advanced extremely, I'd say, well during this COVID environment, Zoom and Skype did not work this way 2 years ago. It was very sketchy. It was, a lot of hiccups. The technology sometimes failed. But, Jeff, I'll start with you and go, the opposite direction. Tell me a little bit about how you've incorporated or embraced technology when it comes to, not just the COVID environment, but just client interaction, how your advisors have embraced it and used it.
Well, I think it was all a test, right? We all probably had upgraded our technology. We all knew that we could do things remote prior to COVID, but none of us really jumped in, right? It was forced upon us. I don't know if the technology was so glitchy at the beginning of COVID. I think there was a lot of user error, right? Because depending on your format of Zoom or WebEx or Teams, they all have different functionalities. So I think we've all become very proficient in all three of those languages. But again, how have we incorporated it? Probably reluctantly at first, and now I think we value, where Zoom comes into play. I think we've all reached Zoom fatigue, however, and so, the amount of Zoom calls in this, even in the office, you'll see a Zoom meeting pop up, and you look and you're like, we're all here. Let's go down to a conference room and see each other, right? So we almost have to deprogram ourselves from Zooming constantly and living in our own offices. But the question was, how have we adapted? I think we accept the technology that's out there, and I think it expands our ability to engage clients. Some clients are very happy over Zoom. Some want that interaction. Yeah. Having that flexibility only helps the value proposition.
Chris?
So I'll answer the question a different way. Technology has increased our productivity. Everyone's productivity at every firm is up. We have somebody on my team said a joke, and he says, I can't wait to go back to work to get a vacation from working from home. So what we've all gone through is trying to find the right balance between preserving that productivity as we do ultimately return to the office, but also identifying what are those things that happened at home that gave us that balance and helped us become more productive. So, I joke a lot, and everybody jokes a lot about, you start off Monday morning with a case of water and a case of energy bars next to your computer where you're going to be on Zoom calls all day long. But at the same time, there are some things, and we actually had a clinical psychologist come in and speak to a resource group at our firm. And some of the findings were very interesting about just taking, if you think about a high-performance athlete, you'll take a break, interval training. Every 15 minutes or so, you'll stop, you'll recalibrate, whether it's just taking a walk, walking the dog, walking upstairs away from your desk. some of the things you do at home will automatically accelerate that balance, because you'll have that ability to rest in between your Zoom calls. And just in listening to it, it was fascinating, and that's a big productivity lever according to a clinical psychologist. So we're trying to determine some of the things that we can introduce firm-wide that will help preserve that, but also preserve the productivity as people come back. So it's just paying attention to those things, other than the technology hacks and how we've been doing this, but also whether or not people are taking vacation. So there's just a lot to pay attention to, and I think one of the things we did by engaging this corporate psychologist was, it was pretty insightful in learning about what some of the things they were focused on that provided that balance to keep employees engaged, preserve our culture, and also preserve the productivity.
Greg, anything to add?
I think, going back 20 years ago, I did a lot of business offshore in Tokyo, and I would look at, the business acumen there, and I would say, my goodness, if the American financial person had sort of this drive to put in the hours that they do here in Tokyo, I think our financial markets, would ramp up. 20 years later, there is no one that has the most insane work ethic that we do in the United States. No one compares to the fact that we are burning the candle, as many hours as we are in a day. So from the Zoom standpoint, for an advisor not to have to go on site and do his quarterly meetings or whatever it may be for financial planning over Zoom has to be incredibly efficient, and I think that's one of the reasons we've seen the assets ramp up. From an internal standpoint, from a management standpoint and running our business, it's incredible how many Zoom meetings turn up in a day, to your point, right? It's 5 or 6 meetings. It's just so easy to gather or tell people to be in one spot at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3:30. So that has become a little bit arduous for everyone working behind the scenes to build the business. But from an advisory standpoint, I could not think of a better way to build your book.
Catlin, you oversee the entire private client group. I was curious, though, from, when you think about some of the bigger markets, DC, New York, where you've got clients have to drive into the office, pay for parking, devote certain time, have a meeting, go over their portfolio. With Zoom and the technology now, you can make it a very, I think, comfortable, if not, pleasurable experience to do a client review with someone. How are you guys approaching this?
Oh, absolutely, completely agree. We've always had a very proactive response to technology. We had our advisors using, we used WebEx prior to COVID. We do now use Zoom, but we had advisors using that with the clients prior to March of 2020. So, what we've really seen over the last 18 months is just greater adoption, right? We always had advisors who were willing to really engage with their clients. We were early to market with an account aggregation tool. We had a lot of advisors who were using that. We had 5 years ago, we created a digital onboarding tool for advisors to bring new assets over when they came to Janney. We had advisors using these. What we've seen over the last 18 months is greater adoption, and technology is it's a tool. It's a really critical tool. It's a very important tool, but it's still just a tool that is available for advisors and their teams to help connect with their clients. And so as we've, over the last 18 months, continued to put more of our resources into technology, it's all about trying to make self-service more possible, right? So giving clients better access to do things themselves so that when they are having those conversations, whether they're in person or whether they're on Zoom, that those conversations are focused on the most important conversations, those goals-based conversations, instead of on some of the more administrative tasks that we've been able to outsource.
Yes, sir.
Could you share your thoughts on how you're handling vaccine mandates and masking for those that are coming back to the office?
Frank, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll take.
Oh, I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
So
That sounds like an operations question, an admin question, not a sales question.
Well, I think about it because B-Riley is a little unique. The health and welfare of our employees was paramount. So out of 2,100 employees, we have not had, thank God, a death across the country through this period of time. It was very important to our chairman and our co-CEO that strict rules were put in place. And most recently, if you have not been vaccinated, you are not allowed on site to a B-Riley office. Whether that changes and what's happening in the courts and, to the point that Chris made. I don't really think there'll be any clarity there anytime soon. But that is kind of a strict policy that we have put in place, that if you're not, it's not just a matter of wearing a mask or socially distancing. You're really not allowed on site if you have not been vaccinated.
Anybody else? Caitlin?
Yeah,
Catlin?
of course, different jurisdictions are going to be more restrictive, but absent any more restrictive requirements, those coming into the branch who aren't vaccinated are required to be masked and social distance, but we have not required vaccinations for those on site.
We also have a daily electronic health questionnaire that people need to fill out, even if you have been vaccinated. Because I'm sure, as we've all seen it, people who have had COVID, have been vaccinated, have gotten COVID again, a different variant or strain. So in addition to that, we require employees coming to our office, colleagues, to be vaccinated, but we also have them fill out a daily health questionnaire. It's just a simple short form to 4 questions, and they submit it, and then they come in.
I got another question.
So, just curious, I mean, the average age of the advisor in our industry is high, I think it's a general way of saying it. And what has the last 18 months meant to that? From what I'm seeing is that advisors I thought would have retired have learned they don't have to. And so while those advisors might struggle with the technology, they seem to have made it far enough where they're extending the runway of their careers, and it's making the transition of the book much more challenging because they don't have to give it up. They don't have to commute an hour and a half into the office. Are those trends you see continuing?
Frank, succession plan challenges?
Yeah, I think that, I would say that it's continuing. The deals are different, right? They're longer deals. Getting back to the Zoom thing, not only have advisors learned how to use technology, but so have the clients, right? So that was an effect, because 2 years ago or 3 years ago, if you were to ask one of the older clients, hey, to jump on a Zoom call to go over a presentation with me, they would have been like, what do you mean, Zoom call, what? Now it's just an ordinary thing, right? And so, but I do think the reason you're seeing extended careers, I'll put it, right? Extended careers is because now that 71-year-old advisor that was a year or two away from retirement, all of a sudden is, doesn't have to commute into Philadelphia anymore. We live right near each other, but now they're in Florida half the year, and their clients are all over the country as well, and they're doing Zoom calls, and this is awesome. I'm making the same amount of money. I got a junior person back up in Philadelphia running the show. My assistant is at her house, and this is great. My clients are happy. My AUM is growing. I think it is not an issue, but it's something that has changed. But look, we're in a business where if you run an efficient practice with a good team, do you really ever have to retire, right? If you do it the right way. For those of us that have been branch managers at different firms, how many times have we had an advisor come into our office and say, I'm going to retire in like 2 years, and we're like, yeah, okay, sure you are. You're going to find Dale, who's going to take over your book, work 50% of the time. You're going to come in the office 2 days a week, and you're going to make a little bit less money. You're going to be like, this is a good deal. I'm not leaving. So it's not any different. The difference is now it's no longer about being in the office. It's they can be in Florida or Texas or wherever else. That's part of the reason why valuations are going up as well. Because in order for you to get that advisor that's 72 years old with $1 million book of business to pull the trigger, I won't say ripcord, but pull the trigger, is the deal's got to be better. It's got to now be worth it for him or her to do that, and that's why you're seeing valuations at all. I won't say all-time highs. I still think they're going to go higher, but that's a direct effect of this issue.
Jeff, anything on advisor longevity?
Look, we're trying to rationalize succession plans on the independent channel and the private client channel, and age is certainly a big factor, which is, before this I came up to you, I'm hoping to chat with you before year end. We've got to rationalize that, and we don't have a firm plan right now, we just don't. Advisors thinking about it,
Yeah.
but it's tricky to get them to that point, and unless you've got some good structure around it. I'm not sure
No,
what you
look,
do.
the sad thing is that, not to be morbid, and congratulations for not having any mortality at your firm, but you think after coming out of 2000, we probably all know somebody that passed away, right, from COVID. You'd think that they would get over the, well, it's not gonna happen to me thing, because that's usually what happens. Oh, this is too complicated, I don't wanna have to figure this thing out, I'm just gonna go back to work. And, I see it a lot where the advisors don't work on not just a succession plan, but a contingent succession plan. Like, for the love of Christ, just put together a contingent succession plan, just in case, right? They just don't wanna go through the hassle, because they think that their buddy that's been their advisor partner for the last 10 years is gonna take over the business and pay their spouse a fair value after they're dead. It doesn't happen that way. They go, 50 cents on the dollar, right? So we get involved in all that stuff, and it's like you need to have those types of conversations, but it's hard. It's a hard conversation, it really is.
I'll throw one other twist to this, right? As we get older, right, you don't have to die to not be able to do a practice, right? I mean, we deal with this on a daily basis. Someone becomes incapacitated, maybe dementia slips in. It's a sad situation, right? And now compliance has to hop in. You've got to engage this person, so you've got to put parameters about an older advisor slipping, right? And a lot of times they don't have a contingency plan. I see a day in the not too distant future where, as part of just normal business practice, we're going to have to engage our advisors and say, listen, right, much like you have life insurance and everything else, the firm is forcing you, encouraging you to put together a program, right? You just have to, because you'd rather be in control of the outcome than someone else, because when it gets there, it's out of your control, and it's sad. I mean, we've all seen it.
If I was an advisor, a financial advisor on the independent side, more so than the W-2 side, part of my business plan would be knocking on the doors of all of the independent advisors in my marketplace and not asking to buy their practice, but explain my value proposition and why I should be a contingent successor for them, just in case. I would do that all week long. And again, it's like an insurance policy, right? They don't have to do it, they're not giving you their business, but just in case, your clients are gonna know where your clients are, where your assets are going, and then we have a document in place that stipulates how much money I'm gonna pay your estate, your wife or whoever, husband, for your practice. That would be a business plan that I would be implementing every single day. I would talk to any advisor I knew and say, who's your contingent successor? What do you mean? And then open the door.
That's a great call, yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say that we actually put a plan like that into place a handful of years ago, and that is what we've seen over the last 18 months. A lot of advisors who said, I don't need to worry about this will never happen to me. Those contingency plans, we started getting those rolling in all the time, which is great. And on the other side of that, we've also seen more advisors realizing, I need to actually think about a longer term plan. I need to come up with a team. I think that not ever retiring or having a later retirement, that's always been a benefit of this business. So I think that just what we're seeing now is people are thinking very much more intentionally about what does that look like. As I stop coming into the office or I stop meeting with clients every day, what is the next step actually going to look like?
How about team development and training? I know we touched on it a little bit earlier about how teams are communicating using Zoom and other forms of digital communication, but I'm thinking about just new employees in general. I mean, we talked about the talent shortage, but even when we do find talent, we have to train them. And it used to be on premises, that used to be on site, and probably our newest employees, without sounding insulting, need that on-site type of engagement more than anyone else. Chris, I'll throw that question to you to see what you all are doing in this world.
So one of the downsides from a cultural and a growth perspective that we've all experienced over the last 2 years is teams that are remote. One of my colleagues here said it earlier, when you have people, especially on a team that are dispersed, some are working from the office, some are working from home, the one that loses in that equation is the junior advisor, the new member of the team who, I'm sure just about everybody in this room grew up in the business as an apprentice. You sat across from someone, you listened to them on the phone, you paid attention, sometimes you taped it. And that's how you learned how to talk to clients. That's how you learned how to position opportunities. That's how you learned to run your business. Is you just observed their behaviors and you acquired that knowledge. And that's gone. It can't exist in a Zoom environment. So the quicker that we get those teams back together, the better we are. We've actually we've got a full day tomorrow after this, an off-site at our office here on 57th Street, and a good part of that day is going to be tackling this issue in a program. And what I think we're going to focus on that mentorship, that old-fashioned master apprentice, the way we came up in the business, but also there's a collaborative piece to it too. So we're dealing with new technology that the next generation of financial advisors are very comfortable with. And what we realized is that there's just as much value in getting them together as a group and then sponsoring. So we do town hall calls, we try to communicate as much as possible, getting all of them, identifying them, getting them on a call on a regular and consistent basis to talk about what's working personally themselves, but then also introduce an expert, a coach, a third-party expert from one of our partners. There's tons of wholesalers that have incredible resources that are partners of ours that are out there that can provide this consulting. Frank could probably help with that as well and provide that consulting. But get on the call and talk to them about some of the things they could be doing of more of, better, or differently as they're working from home to get ready to come back into the office. The last thing is certification. As I think Ron mentioned it this morning, that fear of missing out. Nobody wants to come back after 2 years of COVID at home and say, gosh, I could have gotten an online certificate from Wharton and I could have become a PWA, I could have become a CFP. So that's just a constant reminder. Take advantage of the downtime, but working together collaboratively as a team, I think that's going to help.
I mean, all day we heard speakers talk about the fact that the amount of assets that are there for the taking going into the next 10 years. The fact that only 5,000 headcount are being registered on a yearly basis. What Chris just described is exactly the way I was trained in the business. I was in production for about 6 years on my own, but prior to that I would have never been able to accomplish what I did without being part of a team and without having a mentor, without a senior advisor that taught me the ropes. I just have no idea what it must be like. And again, look, let's not be nearsighted here. So much has changed even in the last 8 months. We will continue to evolve back to more normalcy, probably within another 8 months or 12 months. I mean, this isn't going to be the norm going forward. So teams will come back, they will, train, the training programs will be in place. But until that point, I cannot imagine what it must be like as a new advisor in the business, or anyone that needs to be trained in a critical revenue-facing role.
Catlin, you've got some career track programs that you were talking about, or do you mind sharing with that with the group?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was thinking about team development, I was actually thinking in a slightly different way. And one of the things that probably none of you will be surprised to hear this, over the last 18 months, the number of financial plans that we did for our clients more than doubled. We really saw how critical that was, especially as we were looking at April, May of last year. So many clients felt like they needed that reassurance. And so we've decided to do a couple of things as we move into next year. The first is that we are creating a new career track program specifically for individuals coming out of college, a couple years out of the business, to start in more client admin facing roles within a branch, and then over the next 3 or so years continue to get registered, get their CFP, and then eventually become financial advisors. And they're actually working with all of the advisors within that specific branch, that specific complex. So, hopefully this becomes a eventual teaming succession opportunity, but also just gives them the opportunity to get to know and view a lot of different situations. We also are creating more planning-focused roles for our existing support staff. Those who are interested in career development but not specifically looking to become advisors. So individuals who will specifically focus on the planning process, again, within a specific team or for a branch, just continuing to meet that demand that we have seen over the last 18 months. We do also have, our FA development program. We've had those individuals meet via WebEx every month, really just to try to make sure that they were able to connect. One of the other things that we are going to start doing, this was an idea that came from one of our managers that I absolutely love. We have a lot of individuals who joined teams over the last 18 months, 2 years. We're actually going to host them for a home office visit visit in Philly, just like we would usually do for an advisor who is looking to join Janney. They're going to get to meet with a number of our senior management, learn about a number of the tools and resources, but just as critically, we're bringing them together so they're going to be able to connect, to share best practices, not just then, but having those connections for the future as well.
You know, probably one of the most challenging aspects, at least I thought, when we were discussing this COVID 20 months, the change and shift in the industry, has been defining, creating, developing a corporate culture. It's challenging, but I'm curious to see what the panel is doing and also what they're seeing throughout the industry. Jeff, I want to start with you, because I know we were chatting a little about this just recently the other day.
The culture, you know, all of our firms put a lot of value in culture. We all do, right? But culture is not a piece of paper that talks about your values. Culture is spoken, culture is seen, culture is interaction, it's the whole 9 yards. And so this period we just came through from a culture standpoint, it's been tricky, right? I don't know how an only remote company builds culture. I assume they do in some capacity. But if you have a legacy culture that you want to keep intact, you've got to get people together. You just absolutely have to. We're lucky in Dallas. We really weren't out of the office much. So back office, middle office, C-suite, we kept it together. The branches, a little less so. What we're hoping to do, again, is our home office visits stopped over COVID. We're hoping to bring those teams back in to reacquaint them with. Much like you bring a prospect in for a VIP on occasion, we're going back to our existing teams. And much like you said, we're bringing them back to the home office just to reconnect over the next 12 months. So each of our advisors and each of our advisor teams, however remote they are coming back in to get a taste of the home office again. But from a culture standpoint, I think it has to be personal contact. I think it has to be, but we might have a different opinion there. But it's tricky.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Frank, corporate culture or culture of independence was extremely important going into this. How's it now with the people you're talking to in recruiting world?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier today. There are firms, and I'm not going to name any, that were really successful because they had a good corporate culture, right? And they didn't necessarily handle the transition to this sort of remote work location, and their cultures are cracked a little bit. They didn't handle it well. I think that firms that hide behind it's still COVID protocols and blah, 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 we can't go back to work is an excuse. You know, but firms have to get creative on figuring out how to do that. I know one CEO of a firm literally purchased a, really expensive, van, whatever, the big vans that they drive around the country in, right? And RVs, and drove around to all of his offices, all of his producer offices. He's figured, well, listen, they're not going to come out, so I'm gonna go and see them. That is the advisors that he went and pulled up in his RV. This particular guy who didn't have to do any of that. Those advisors will never leave that firm because a Zoom call is okay, fine, whatever. Even bringing them to the home office is great, but where the CEO gets into an RV and goes and spends the entire COVID period traveling around the country in an RV was a pretty big thing. It's the stuff like that you all, if you're in those positions, you have to be creative. You have to do things better than your competitors, right? So, if you're hearing that your competitors flying an RV around, I don't know, maybe you get in a plane and, I don't know, you need to do something different. You have to be thinking differently because all of your advisors that are working from home, they're not having to go in the office, it's made it a hell of a lot easier to talk to firms like mine because they don't have to let me shut the door. My manager's 2 offices over. And they can pull up their stuff and they can take pictures of their screens and all of these things that, they weren't allowed to do. So you have to be thinking about, I would imagine it's like training for any event or an Ironman, right? You have to be thinking about where your competitors are and what they're doing and what do you have to do to stay ahead of them. And company culture is, again, it's not this it's this thing out in the sky, but it's really, really, really important. Most advisors that we work with don't leave their firm because one firm's giving them a 90% payout and the other firm's giving them a 92% payout, right? They're leaving for the other stuff. An increase, most of the time, our clients say, listen, I just want it to be an economic wash for me. Like, as long as I'm not going backwards, it's the culture, it's the, I don't hear from the CEO, I don't hear from the president, I don't hear from the regional folks, so why am I paying them anymore, right? Why am I giving up we used to say this to Smith Barney, 60 cents every dollar, right?
Right.
Because now they're at home and now they're not even getting, before you can say, well, you get the office and you get support staff here and all that, now it's even harder to make that case.
Yeah.
So you have to make culture like #1 priority in how do you continue to drive the culture of all of your firms where not everybody's coming in the office, which I believe that people should get into the office and think it'll happen.
Yeah.
I think that's where you get the best culture, but you just have to be creative, use technology. Your firm should have an Instagram account. Your firm should have a Facebook account. And on the Instagram account is where you put all your stuff that's non-financial related, but it gives an idea of what your culture is so that your advisors that are all over the country can see what's going on at your firm and the fun stuff that your firms are doing to build culture. Events and client events and charity events and all those, whatever. Those are the kinds of things that you have to do. Otherwise, your advisors are going to just leave for a firm that's doing that stuff, like Hilltop.
Catlin, you did a summer campaign, didn't you?
Yeah, so we earlier in the summer started holding what we were calling Together Again events. Essentially, our CEO, senior leadership, went to some of our major markets, got all of the branches, not just the advisors, the support staff as well, out for happy hour. The whole point was just to be together again. And, it was wonderful for us from the home office to get to see them, to reconnect with them. But what was really rewarding is seeing all these people connect again, right? People who were maybe just a handful of miles away in a different office, but they hadn't seen each other in 18 months. That has been huge, just to be able to reconnect and start that flow of communication again. I think that over the last 18 months, people knew that they could call if they had a major issue, but you lost enough of the personal connection that some of the what we like to call collaborative collision, right? The hey, I just want to bounce an idea off of you. That kind of dissipated a little bit, and it's been coming back over the last couple of months.
I have to start with a disclaimer because we were down at a SIFMA conference about a month and a half ago, and Catlin was talking to her partner Jerry at Janney about their Together Again tour, and I said, it's ironic, we're doing the same thing, and a lot of other firms were saying, same thing, nobody got a Winnebago. But we're just going around and visiting offices, and I think ours was called, We Really Missed You, and it's time we got to see you. So I looked at Catlin and Jerry, and they said Together Again, and I totally stole it and branded it. So for the Wedbush colleagues in the room who are laughing right now, that's where I got the idea from. But we're doing the exact same thing, and it's just a question of getting in front of people. It's spending time with not just the financial advisors, but the CSAs, the operations managers, the branch managers, the regional executives. And another simple thing that, Frank, that you mentioned is I have everybody's cell phone, right? We have everyone has a disaster recovery plan, but it's really simple to get everyone's cell phone number. And I'll call periodically and just say, how are you doing? How's everything going? How is it working from home? Everything okay? Anything we can do for you? Just checking in, no real reason for the call. But just reaching out and calling people from a cultural perspective, that and having town halls, take advantage of Zoom, give updates on what's happening at the firm, give everyone the opportunity to see each other. But for holiday parties, for example, we're doing a firm-wide holiday party, and then we're giving each office the local decision. If you want to get together, have a local holiday party with whoever wants to come, whoever's comfortable coming. But we're making those decisions, local decisions based on local laws and local beliefs. But it's really important to keep everyone engaged and let them see each other. You'd be surprised at how many people nearly cried when they saw our receptionist on our main floor in our headquarters office in Los Angeles. She came in for a day, and every single person that walked through the door hugged her. And it was great. So we have to preserve that as we're coming back to the office.
Right.
These sound like super spreader events.
What kind of shop are you running?
Well, you know where the risk is at some of these firms, but, you know, I'm domiciled here in New York, and you could see just over the last month and a half, people are shot out of a cannon in New York. The human interaction when you're around the office or when you leave and go out to a restaurant or a bar, whatever it may be, people are kinder, people want to engage in conversation. The human element and the interaction between people is really wanting at this point. So it's a balance, right? I think what they're doing with their firm is incredibly, forward to bring everyone together and have them feel good. And then it's their choice, and according to regulations, what you want to do thereafter. But just having one event where people get together, if they're comfortable in doing that, I think speaks volumes. And I'm hoping we haven't even talked about what we're going to do in our New York event or a Christmas party, but I'm hoping that we head in that direction as well. It's important at this point.
You gonna say something, Frank?
I was just going to say that, I think Chris's idea of cell phones and stuff like that, I think about what the NFL is doing, and they're advertising all about communicating with anxiety and stress and all that, and I think there is a lot of that is happening under the surface, and so it's really important if you're in a leadership role that you reach out to everybody, not just your biggest producers, right, but the operations people, the assistants, because they haven't been in the office, and there's a lot of anxiety around that sometimes, the human, like, sort of interacting with people. I've seen it, I see it all the time. We talk to advisors. My point is, and this is just not a brand awareness thing, but it's a real thing. We're all busy, right? We're all working, we're doing our thing, but there's a lot of people that aren't going 100 miles an hour because they're riddled with anxiety over what's the change going to be like, and I think we all have to be aware of that. So we all talk about coming back to the office, and it's easy for us to say because we want to be back in the office, but we have to have some awareness of it's not as easy for everybody, and to just text somebody, hey, how you holding up? How's it going? Just thinking about you. Sometimes that's all somebody wants to hear, right? I'm here if you need me. So I know we're talking about growing businesses and all that stuff, but sometimes the little things like having a cell phone of an assistant and just texting her or him, hey, how you doing, bud? I wouldn't call it woman, bud, but So that's my only point about that one piece.
Yes, Rob?
Has anything changed in the way you operate because of COVID that won't change back after this is over?
Interesting question.
I'd like to think the frequency of communication, but I think that's aspirational at this point. But we are paying attention to it, and as much as we try to over-communicate, sometimes there's danger in it in providing too much information too often. But I can absolutely tell you, speaking for our firm, that we've seen a massive benefit in the increase in communication, and we talk about that in our executive committee meetings every week, and that's something we're all committed to maintain and preserve as we move forward, no matter what happens.
I think just being aware of and using all of the different channels of communication that we have open to us. One of the things that we started probably in June of last year is we started offering these virtual events for clients and prospects that were completely organized by the home office, but we also had events that advisors could use themselves with their own clients. And I think realizing that we don't just have to do things in person, that we have the opportunity to be reaching, whether that's clients or prospects or potential advisors who might be interested in joining Janney, that we have all of these different avenues of communication. That's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's probably safe to say that there's going to be something else in the future. There's going to be another pandemic. We can't fool ourselves by thinking this is the only time this is ever going to happen. Something else like this or similar like this will happen again. And I guess as this is a industry and transition summit, and we're talking about how this changes the way we do business and recruit or evolve as advisors, just free-flowing commentary. How is this going to look 2 to 5 years out? How has this really changed our models and what we're doing when it comes to transitioning, recruiting? I'll just let anybody jump in with that type of commentary.
I would say
Greg.
that, number one, the cost savings over the last year and a half on travel and entertainment, the firms have pocketed from this. The fact that if I needed to go to LA for a meeting from New York, I had to line up the people, the date, the flights, everything else. We've just become so much more efficient with business with this video. Now, to what degree you want to take that into the future, but it's really changed the efficiencies overall in the business. It's really helped.
Has the efficiencies, though, been counteracted with the technology expense? I mean, you look at enterprise models for Zoom and, campaigns for social media, which is what a lot of people are starting to do these days. They didn't before. I mean, how are these two balancing out?
Maybe I'm a little jaded because I'm in New York, so I see the pricing of hotels and
That's
flights and other things, so I think a little differently. I think we come out way ahead.
How about you, Jeff?
I think we come out way ahead. The phrase is technology dictates what need necessitates, right?
Okay.
And we've been forced into this technology. We've adapted to it. Some of us might have been reluctant, but if you can't see the efficiencies it produces, you're going to be left behind. So going forward, everyone's a lot more efficient. And I think those that were hesitant to adapt and accept new technology will accept the next greatest thing, I think, with open arms, for sure, right?
Yeah, I think if you use technology, the other thing that COVID has trained clients to do is use not just Zoom, but go on Facebook and Instagram to see their grandkids and their children because they weren't allowed to see them for a year and a half. So the only way they could do it is by using technology to get online. And so for a financial advisor, what I think this has done, which is not going to be undone, is opened up your geography for your prospects. Your prospects are no longer the small town that you're in, and if you're going to meet somebody at a country club or whatever, if you're using the technology the right way through social media, and I don't, by the way, I don't consider LinkedIn social media. Just so, like that's a basic to entry. It's social. It's LinkedIn. It's social. It's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter to a degree, but not really. Those two channels. If you can learn how to use those to get your messaging out, both on your culture, if you're a financial advisor, and the advisors that we've worked with that have transitioned to a firm that was more restrictive, to a firm that opened up their avenues and their ability to use social media, they saw their growth grow exponentially from prospects, from using sort of group Zoom calls for all their clients every Friday, instead of having a market update call with 35 clients that call in during the course of a week. One client that does a 4 o'clock call every Friday and has trained their clients, don't call to talk to me about the direction of the firm this week. Just come on the Friday call. And so it's saved them time. But then they're using their cell phone and to post Instagram stuff and, again, cultural stuff. Yeah. You have to be embracing those things. It's not going to unwind. Clients, an advisor can't say anymore, my clients are older, they don't use technology. Bullshit. They do more than ever before, and you just don't want to use it because you don't know how to use it. That's the truth there. Yeah.
Chris?
Sorry.
No.
Catlin? Oh, okay, I thought you had something to add.
I think an interesting opportunity here, and I'd like to see if you see it. We've recruited numerous wirehouse advisors to our platform over the past 12 months. And to a T, they all say, oh my goodness, I can use social media, right? They're so restricted in the wirehouses that, that is not going to benefit the wirehouses, right? Because as you said, the clients, the end users, they've accepted technology. And I think they're going to reach out to their Morgan Stanley guy or their Merrill guy and say, can we do this? No, we can't communicate that way. I think that the end client will dictate, I want to interact that way because it's more efficient for the end client. And I think that benefits most of us in this room.
What I'm seeing, and I see this a lot more in the RIA space, is that clients are following somebody on Instagram, and I have a couple of clients that are really good at this, and they're showing them at client charity events, and they're showing their wine that they're drinking and their trips, and they're showing who they are as individuals, and the Morgan guy isn't worried about whether or not they can go on social media. They should be worried about their client going, sort of like the Jerry Maguire thing. Hey, how come we don't have that relationship?
Right.
He's this person who's just watching somebody on social media is going, that's the advisor I want to do business with. Because look, he cares about his kids. He's always posting pictures with him and his clients. Like, my advisor doesn't, I don't even hear from my advisor. And when I do, it's a Zoom call, right? They have to embrace it, because before you know it, they're gonna get the call, you know, I love you, but I'm moving to somebody else, who's not even in the same state.
Right.
Because you don't need to be anymore.
Yeah, unless we have any other questions, I'm just going to ask the panel to give one unique comment about everything we talked about today in closing, and then I'll turn it back to Tony for our next presenter. So, Chris, I'll start with you.
Criminals.
So, just to underscore what Frank said, if my mom, who's 81 years old, has mastered Snapchat and can send me a picture of herself as a piece of broccoli with a little note under it that says, "Love you, you don't call me enough." If I'm getting that from my mother, right, at 81 years old, then we've entered a new era of communication. Try contacting your kids. Call them on their cell phone. See if they'll answer. They're not going to answer. They'll FaceTime you, or they'll send you a Snapchat, or they'll tell you to go on Discord. So we have to adapt and evolve, because this is an ever-changing channel of communication. And I think you're right. We need to embrace it, and we need to help our advisors and our firm embrace it as well.
Greg.
I'm 37 years in this business, and I just, I think about just how proud I am of our industry. Our industry sometimes gets some bad press for the rates that we charge and other things that they want to beat us down on. But from an advisory standpoint, it's just been an outstanding 2 years and a testament to how true Wall Street and efficiently can work for client movement of funds, for trading, for interaction with the client and doing what's best for them. And I wish there was more press out there on just how well we've run our industry during this period.
Well said. Catlin.
Yeah, I think that never waste a crisis, right? I think that there was so much opportunity that presented itself over the last 18 months in ways that we were going to be able to connect with clients, in ways that our advisors were going to be able to better know their clients, and vice versa. And I can only see that those relationships are going to continue to develop and grow, and we're going to be able to continue to communicate in ways that ultimately allow the advisors and their clients to focus on the most important conversations that they have day to day.
Frank?
So one of the questions that we ask our clients is, no matter how big a practice they are, is what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? Because it really gets to the heart of why they're having a conversation with us, where they're trying to go. And we start with that question because the industry is at a point in time where there's no reason for an advisor to stay at a firm that doesn't work for them, right? For whatever the reason is. And if they're unhappy at that firm, they're making a decision to continue to be unhappy, right? Because there are a lot of good firms out there in the industry. There's no reason to stay at a firm that makes you unhappy, is hindering performance. But to start a transition, you have to understand what you want to be when you grow up, and what are you trying to get accomplished? Is it retirement? Is it whatever? Start with that type of question, because if you don't sort of like having a road, you have to know where you're going in order to figure out how to get there. And there are plenty of firms that can help you. Every firm has different qualities. Every firm is the right fit. But if you're at a firm and you're unhappy, you're making that decision to stay at that firm when you don't need to. There's so much opportunity out there. There's so many great firms out there with great leaders that care about their advisors. And if you're an advisor that you feel like your firm doesn't care about you, you shouldn't be there, because you don't need to be.
And Jeff?
Well, thank you. Hey, I'm relatively new to the Advisor Hub family. I joined Hilltop Securities about 9 months ago. This is my second Advisor Hub event. And I just want to say that the quality of individuals, the friendships I've made already is second to none. Yes, a lot of us are in competition, but I would say to a T that I respect my competition, right? I can pick up the phone, I can ask some questions, I can get some help. This is truly a unique community that you've created, Tony. So thank you, and I look forward to the next event.
And I want to thank our panel. It was a great conversation, great discussion. Thank you again for audience participation. And Tony, I'll let you go on with the next presenter, or Bill. Thank you.